Oh, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the Rockies red-glare, the bombs burst in mid-air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. I thought I would do a little something to shake that fruit up in your bellies and to call us to order for this amazing occasion. My name is Dr. Tanya Bailey, and I serve as the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Community Engagement here at OUWB. And I am really excited that I get an opportunity to open up today's Varner Vitality Lecture Series with a great welcome and great thanks to, first and foremost, the Dean of OUWB, Dean Carpenter. Thank you for your trust and your leadership. To all of my colleagues in OUWB, executive leadership team, and all of the deans, and more importantly, all of you for joining us today. I also want to leave room today in a space to welcome one of our key sponsorships and partners, Corewell Health, who has been a great support in ensuring that we have support financially for this great endeavor. And I would be remiss if I did not thank all of the planning team for the Sophia Nelson's visit, residency here, and our Culture 365 initiatives. And because of that, I also am honored that the provost and her amazing team has allowed us to feature Sophia Nelson at this event. With that in mind, I would love to bring up my colleague from Corewell, Jerry Price, who is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisor. Thank you.
I'm just going to warn you, I will not be singing. I do not want to clear the room this early in the morning. But just want to thank you all. Again, my name is Jerry Price. I am the advisor for diversity, equity, and inclusion for Corewell Health, our new integrated healthcare system here in the great eastern side of Michigan. And I just want to say that we are so extremely delighted to be a partner of Oakland University and to support this week-long residency with the absolutely amazing Sophia Nelson. I had a chance to meet her in 2023, and the words she spoke then were so profound that it had me challenging some of my own thoughts and my own perspectives. And as we move into 2024, this residency will be a week that you can ask those curious questions. Those questions about how well do you know yourself? Have those courageous conversations that are sometimes held in hushed corners of the room instead of on podiums and in front of audiences. It's that time to challenge and have those conversations. Oakland University and Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine, you are training the future doctors of tomorrow, the doctors who are charged at being even more culturally intelligent, who are charged with understanding the communities in which they serve, in which they live, and to ensure that every person they see can reach the goals of life and thrive and become part of a society where they can reach their optimal health. So Corewell Health is not only proud to be here, we are proud to be a sponsor, we are proud to be an ally of this work. So Sophia, we have no doubt that this week will be a week-long session of understanding, creating inclusion, supporting environments of trust where people can show up as their authentic selves and lend their authentic voice to the challenges of today, but building the solutions of tomorrow. So thank you for this time. And again, I will not sing for you today.
It is my distinct honor and pleasure to bring to the podium our provost, Provost Britt, who will then give her remarks today. Can we celebrate her?
When you hear talent like that, I'm just asking her, what can't you do, right? Like, that is absolutely amazing. So this is one of the things Sophia, our esteemed speaker today, was asking me, so what brought you to Oakland? Because we're from some similar spaces. She graduated from Cal State San Diego. I was at Cal State Long Beach for 20 years, then Cal State Monterey Bay for 6.5. And as you probably know, I'm headed back to lead Cal State Stanislaus. And this Varner Vitality was one of the things that made me so interested in Oakland. This, the Pontiac Initiative, the School of Medicine, the interprofessional stuff that was going on across health sciences and human services, all of these things just make Oakland a really different, very special, cutting-edge place. So to answer your question, this was part of it. And what a better speaker than Sophia Nelson to start us back post-pandemic. So we're really excited, obviously, to have you here. What I know will be a fascinating and memorable presentation. Named in honor of Oakland's very first chancellor, Durward, that's a hard one for me, Durward, Woody Varner. I just should have done the Woody thing. That would have been easier. Thanks, Toy Story. This lecture has been a highlight of each academic year at Oakland University. And like I said before, we've been on a hiatus for 3.5 years. So this is definitely a real bring back for us. We've been proud to host the event as part of broader efforts to inspire, support, and honor the highest academic and scholarly aspirations of our beloved campus community. With this in mind, I'm pleased to say that today's speaker is held in as high esteem as any we have welcomed to date. This is saying a great deal because we've had all kinds of folks here. In the past, we've been proud to have guests like former President of India, APJ Abdul Kalam, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author Thomas Friedman, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin, celebrated primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall, and renowned composer Dr. Morten Johannes Lauridsen, to name just a few. Before I get started, I really want to ask that everybody turn off their phones. You can go ahead and take pictures or do whatever you want, but silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices you might have. Also, please, no flash photography or video. Oh, no flash photography or video recording will be permitted, but we're getting it. We've got it here. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our honored guest and presenter. Sophia A. Nelson is an award-winning author, journalist, and corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion trainer who, for the last 15 years, has worked with countless women employee resource groups to help improve the personal, family, and professional lives of working women. A national columnist for the Washington Post, Politico Magazine, USA Today, CNN Opinion, and other major publications, she is able to share extensive expertise on work-life balance, so we really have to talk, wellness and mental self-care, now even more in the workplace, emotional intelligence, which, as I hope everyone heard, we're really thinking more about EQ. We're also thinking about CQ, right? The cultural quotient and how that works in. Skills building, collaboration versus competition, and equity for women of color in the C-suite. Beyond her journalism and training work, Sophia has served as an adjunct professor of philosophy and religion in Virginia and as a scholar, lecturer, and panelist at schools such as Harvard and the JFK School of Government, as well as at historically Black colleges and universities such as Grambling University, Hampton University, Philander Smith College, and Southern University. Notably, our distinguished guest is a Pulitzer Prize-nominated author in letters, and she is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I knew we were going to get the squeak, right? So go ahead, just bring it on. There, okay. The first time that happened, I honestly did not know what that was. I should also not neglect to mention that Ms. Nelson is a retired attorney who's been admitted to the prestigious bar of the United States Supreme Court and was the first Black female investigative counsel to the U.S. House of Representatives majority staff for the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight. So maybe there's a Supreme office you should just take on right now, right? All of this said, I am sure it's clear why we are all so delighted to have her here with us on the campus of Oakland University. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Sophia A. Nelson.
Good afternoon. You guys can do better than that. Come on, good afternoon. Okay, now before I read a word of my prepared text, and it is prepared because this is a lecture, and I must be scholarly and academic and do this the right way. Normally, I'm on the stage and I'm kind of dancing around and doing my thing. This is not that kind of conversation today. But let me say something before I get into my remarks. I promise you, everybody in this room, stick with me from the beginning till the end, because I'm going to say something that's going to make you uncomfortable. I was writing it, and some of the stuff I was writing was like, you really want to say that? So you have to think about it. It's because we're in this very interesting space right now. And the people in this room, we've got to come together and figure out how we move academia forward, how we move our country forward, and how we do it together. And that's not just the kumbaya pie in the sky thing. We're going to talk about that. I came to Michigan. I got a cold, as you could tell. Thank you, Michigan. And but I just want you to know, if I challenge you by something I say, stick with me, because I promise you it's going to be balanced, okay? So let's challenge ourselves. And thank you, Provost, for that wonderful introduction. And OU's loss will be Cal State's gain, and you're going to much better weather, so that's a good thing. But thank you so much. I also want to shout out to Dean Carey. Are you here? Okay. Thank you for the breakfast this morning that she hosted with all of the deans of all of the colleges. It was a great opportunity. The graduate school, all the colleges were there, and Dr. Bailey was there, of course, and we had a really good opportunity to just talk. because they lead the colleges. They are on the ground. They deal with everything. And, I think we all share concerns that we're in a very interesting space right now in our country, and we have a lot of work to do. Let me just say this also, that Oakland University is pretty unique. You are mostly a commuter school, which I think is just a whole different culture on a college campus. And I think that people who are working and going to school and paying for it, that just sets a whole different tone. And, I've been amazed as I really studied the school and looked at how peaceful it is on your campus. That's a feather in your hat. A lot of colleges right now, as you know, are in rancor. There's a lot of upset. There's a lot of protest. There's a lot of everything. And we're going to talk about all that. So I'm going to skip over all the parts that you already talked about. I was going to mention who had spoken before and all of that good stuff. So let's skip through that. And let me get to what I think is more important here. So let me say this. I'm delighted to be the first lecturer speaking to you since 2019, which was just before the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States and all the world around us. The speaker just before me in 2019 was Lech Walesa, which is a hard act to follow, the former president of Poland. So I have big shoes to fill today, and I will do my best to do so. I'm also very humbled that I am the first African-American speaker in this lectureship ever invited. And that says a lot to me, and this is Minority Health Month that we're kicking off in April. So I'm really excited about the work we're gonna do this week, Tanya. We're gonna have a health equities conference on Thursday. You wanna tell them where that is and how to come? Okay. 6 o'clock we start, and that's going to be an amazing, we have a conversation before that, and then we have, but you're welcome, and men, you're welcome to come to that too. It's not just a woman's thing, it's a health equity, it's about all of us. Let me say that I would like to thank the Division of Academic Affairs, the Office of the Provost, your President, Corewell Health, of course, and Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the William Beaumont School of Medicine, for bringing me here. Tanya, that's you, of course, Dr. Tanya Bailey. Thank you for that. And I also wanted to give a shout out to your men's basketball team, which, I was on Twitter that night, and because my San Diego State Aztecs were playing as well, we won, you guys won it, and we both lost in the next round. But I thought it was great that people were on Twitter going, where's Oakland University? Is that in California? And we're like, no, it's in Michigan. So kudos to you guys on a good run, and I thought your student body acquitted themselves really well, particularly Jack. I really like him. I want to meet him. Is he around here somewhere? Because he seems like a great guy. Let me open my talk today with a familiar phrase from the founding of this great republic, as our new national motto was unveiled in 1780. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Ironic, if you think about it, that our founding fathers, all white, all male, all men of wealth and status, and regrettably all in to continue the practice of American slavery, would talk about oneness and diversity. As we know from census records, from 1776, over 1/3 of the population of the colonies were enslaved persons. Think about that, 1/3. Our national motto, coupled with Mr. Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, espoused core American ideas of equality, equanimity, liberty, oneness. They called on Americans to strike that critical balance between remaining true to our own individuality and beliefs, our own diverse backgrounds and viewpoints, while respecting the same of others who may differ from us. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Fast forward to where we find ourselves right now in 2024 as a republic, as a nation, as academics, as educators, as scholars, as American citizens, and as community leaders. And I think we can all agree that this nation is deeply divided, perhaps more divided now than at any time since before the Civil War. Now that's a big statement I'm making, stick with me. Our great democratic republic is being tested right now in real time. And make no mistake, democracy is on the line. I mentioned that I was the first lecturer since 2019, And if you remember, just kind of close your eyes for a moment and think back to that time and what it was like going in 2019 to 2020 in that early February, March timeframe. And we went from being people that could walk all around and move all around to all of a sudden everything just stopped. We were shut in. Kids were home being schooled. There was serious illness. All of us probably in this room either knew somebody who had COVID or we all had it ourselves at some point. But during that time, if you recall, something extraordinary happened. The Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, which came after the horrific murder of George Floyd. It awakened a sleeping generational giant. It awakened a collective national soul that I had hoped changed our hearts forever to better see and challenge social inequities, racial animus, and police brutality, particularly against Black men. Sadly, it did not. Companies who pledge financial scholarships, reparations for displaced communities, and greater DEI commitments to diversity in their workforces at all levels, as you know, fell off. They basically reneged on their promises. The moment passed, and we all moved on. We went back to our respective camps, and we're seemingly, in my opinion, we seem like a people who have lost our way, lost our compass. Let's consider state legislatures are banning books, limiting or banning women from reproductive health care, changing school curriculums, banning Black studies and LGBTQ+ studies, banning shameful historical truths so that some will not be made uncomfortable, banning DEI. We are yelling and not talking to one another. Political candidates, for the first time in our history, refused to accept legitimate election results. And on January 6th, 2021, the world held its collective breath as we watched as angry rioters attacked the cradle of democracy, our US Capitol. Our college campuses, many of them, have become battlegrounds of anger and violent protests versus a place of civil debate, passionate disagreement, and respectful dissent. And for some of a certain age and of generations gone by, they see their revered country and freedoms being taken away. They see conservative values or their religious beliefs being silenced by a new so-called wokeness. They see the rise of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a threat to well-established American order of the way things used to be and the way they should remain. They feel entitled to take freedoms from others while at the same time demanding that individual liberties and personal freedoms never be taken from them. On the other hand, for a new generation of Americans, the students that we teach, they see social and restorative justice as a demand that must be urgently met. They see protest as what Dr. King described as the language of the unheard. They see questioning authority, pushing back, and canceling or doling out consequences to those with whom they disagree, find offensive, or believe to be engaging in hate speech as just desserts. That is where we are, polar opposites. And I, for one, and I suspect many of you, do not believe that we can coexist with this standoff much longer. We all know that something is amiss in this country, even if we do not speak it out loud. Something's got to give, folks. Somebody must step up and lead. Somebody must come and save us from, well, us. But let me help you, my fellow citizens. Nobody is coming to save us or fix us but us. And the good news is that we have the tools and the talent to both right the wrongs of the past and make straight the pathway ahead. As America approaches our 250th birthday in July 2026, I want to share 3 pathways with you today on how we can and must work collaboratively, build bridges, and still preserve that all-important, rugged American individualism and freedom at the same time. Let's be direct. Academic freedom and diversity are under immense pressure right now. They're under assault. And if you miss that, you're not paying attention. The question we must answer then is, how do we build bridges between the two so that we can preserve and strengthen them both for the long haul? Hear what I said. We have to strengthen academic freedom and diversity at the same time. I'm going to retitle my remarks that you see on the slides just a little bit because I want to give you a call to action. I want you to leave here thinking about these three things that I'm going to give you. And I'm going to retitle this talk as Redefining Freedom: 3 Pathways to Embracing a New Concept of American Liberty that Promotes Genuine Inclusion for All. I want to offer us a way that if we can find the courage to listen to one another, to actually speak to one another, not text, not type, not block, not delete, not ghost, but if we can actually talk to one another and listen and see the humanity in one another, I believe that we can heal this country for the next generation ahead. And we can work to better perfect this union. For our purposes during this lecture, I want to start with the academy, the university. Based on the evidence we have before us, I think it is fair assessment to say that higher education at this moment in history seems to be in great peril. Let me explain. Now, we are all painfully aware of what happened in Israel on October 7, 2023. The terrorist attacks unleashed rightfully brought worldwide horror and rebuke. But what happened on American colleges' campuses, with the exception of ones like this one, was frankly alarming. We saw a dangerous cocktail of legitimate, hear me, legitimate protected speech and protests turn into something that is not speech at all. It became threats, anger, rage, and actual violence. More than a dozen lawsuits have been filed in this country since January. More than a dozen. I think it's more like 24 for Title VI and civil rights violations with respect to what happened on our college campuses during the fall and into the early part of this year. Folks, this cannot be our future, litigating our way against each other. That can't be where we're headed, but that's where we're headed. We watched 3 of America's most vaunted Ivy League institutions, all of whom had female presidents at Penn, Harvard, and MIT, go before Congress and fumble badly. A basic premise we as academics and leaders must always put first: our shared humanity. It is never okay to hide behind context when what is at issue is our most sacred freedoms. To be secure in our person, to pursue life, liberty, and happiness without restriction or threat. The type of moral capitulation by university leadership cost 2 of the 3 presidents their jobs. For Harvard's first Black president in 387 years, the loss of her position was a true setback. It became a firestorm with allegations of plagiarism and anti-DEI insults being hurled at her. It was awful. If you were on social media, you know what I'm talking about. It was a huge loss, as only 1 in 10, hear me now, only 1 in 10 Black women serves as a college president in the United States. Now, some of you may be asking, why you, Ms. Nelson, why are you here? Why are you speaking to us about this intersectionality of DEI and academic freedom? And it's a good question to ask, and it's one that I hope to answer for you today. As some of you know, and as the provost mentioned, I was an adjunct college professor and scholar of philosophy and religion in my home state of Virginia. A few years ago, I unwittingly fell prey on my campus to the anger and protests that are now our go-to reflex response when we choose emotion over constructive human engagement. I thought I was expressing a religious point of view on social media in the form of a question over a controversial comic book character in the middle of a hotly contested gubernatorial election in my home state of Virginia being fought over CRT and parental rights. You guys remember that election? Glenn Youngkin won that election. I honestly thought I was just being Sophia Nelson, the opinion columnist, the political analyst, not the professor who was popular and great with all of her students, regardless of their racial background, gender identity, religious or political viewpoints. Regrettably, my tweet caught the ire of another faculty member of a marginalized group who started a red-hot blazing firestorm. First internally, and then it turned public, and it turned ugly. Now, my first instinct was to do what? Issue an apology, mea culpa, and then say, let's get on campus and talk about this. Turn it into a teachable moment for me and for you. Show the students how to resolve conflict, how to disagree and engage in respectful dialogue, even when we don't see eye to eye. Needless to say, that is not what happened. This is why I stand before you today so deeply committed to building bridges, because I know firsthand what it is like to have the bridges burned down around me. And yet, this has become our new normal. And it is dangerously corrosive, folks, to both academic freedom and our individual civil liberties. Let me be clear. We cannot use illiberal means to protect our liberal democracy. Let me say that again. We cannot use illiberal means to protect our liberal democracy. Tolerance and respect for different viewpoints does not mean agreement with them or celebration of them. Let me say that again because you might have missed it. Tolerance and respect for different viewpoints does not mean agreement with them or celebration of them. It means all of us must be free to ask a civil question in the public square, or share an unpopular opinion, or be flat out wrong in what we profess without fear of reprisal, loss of reputation, or worse, loss of our livelihoods. Illiberalism does not serve the academy, and most importantly, the contribution of diverse viewpoints and passionate discourse on campus that grows us all. Likewise, we must be free as academics and leaders and citizens to call out things that are clearly immoral and inhumane. But the question I think we're all wrestling with is, what's the line? And what actually crosses the line? It has to be more than you hurt my feelings. It has to be more than I'm upset or I'm offended, because young people, keep living. You're going to get offended a lot in life. And I feel like we are not preparing you for what happens in the workplace and what happens in marriage and what happens in life and what happens when you pay mortgages and all those things. It ain't pretty most of the time. It has wonderful moments, but we've got to give you the skill set to understand it. Your feelings are your feelings. We all have them, but we got to learn how to manage them. The 3 Ivy League presidents I referenced earlier missed a great opportunity, in my humble opinion, to say to the world, not on our watch. There is a context. Now stick with me, because I'm going to say 2 important things. This is important. The context is, when you're talking about Jewish people in this country and Jewish students, is that any attack, there's a frame of reference, and we know what it is, World War II. It's the Holocaust. So it's not just something we can play with. It has to be called out. And at the same time, folks, we can also raise our voices loudly in support of the innocent peoples in Gaza. And in the middle of this crisis, who did nothing wrong to anyone. And we should speak up for their humanity, for their care, and their right to live in peace and well-being too. My point is, freedom is a both and, not an either or. We can believe both of those positions I just espoused at the same time. We can be appalled at the attacks on our ally Israel. And what was done, it was horrific. And we can protect our Jewish students and faculty when they're being locked in libraries or jeered at or have to move off campus. At the same time, we can show humanity and decency and care for the other point of view, the people who are innocent, who have lost their life because they're now caught between nations or a nation and a terrorist group fighting. There are lessons we should learn from this past year in particular, and we must learn them. We must all engage and adapt to protect our freedoms and viewpoint diversity at all costs, because they are the fundamental backbone of who we are. Academic freedom, as you know, but I'll remind you, is a fundamental aspect of university scholarship. Inquiry, teaching, and learning. It encompasses the open exchange of ideas, the exploration of civic ideals, the evolution of cultural norms, and the cultivation of inclusive social structures. Safeguarding academic freedom is paramount in upholding the foundational principles of democracy. And those principles are what? Free speech, inclusivity, e pluribus unum. They wrote that in 1780 with 1/3 of the population enslaved. Think about that. It includes diverse perspectives and robust intellectual discourse. In a time where these fundamental principles face unprecedented challenges, it is my goal today to help us to strengthen higher education institutions to be the premier training ground, not the courts. The courts shouldn't be the training ground for what we're trying to do here, because the courts by nature are adversarial. We should be the premier training ground for freedom and civil liberties and to thrive. Well past this century, long after everyone in this room is gone, we want to know that we left something behind called America that's still standing. All right, the first pathway I want to offer to you is to honor, and this I'm talking to the leadership now. I'm talking to deans, I'm talking to provosts and presidents and those in leadership, as well as faculty. The first pathway I want to offer is to honor the doctrine of neutrality. We must be neutral arbiters on campus and off. What does that mean? It means we must resist the temptation to fire off inflammatory university statements and rebuke colleagues, faculty, or students because we do not share their political point of view, or we dislike a social media post that clearly is protected speech, or we don't like who they are, we don't like how they show up. Take your pick. That's not our job as academics, to pick sides. Neutrality allows for the open debate again of ideas and the changing social structures. Higher education and intellectual diversity have come under attack in a way that we haven't seen in a really long time, posing threats to the core values of the academy. Just this morning, I don't know about you, but I saw the New York Times and PBS was running an article that if one of the two candidates is reelected to office, one of the goals is to do away with civil rights laws. Right there. Google it, read it right now in real time so you know I'm not making it up. That shook me. And the reason is because there is a belief, and we're going to talk about this, that there is reverse discrimination now. That DEI and wokeism are destroying America. They're telling you. The biggest problem, in my humble opinion, that America is facing right now is that everyone wants their own individual, gender, racial, or other rights to be paramount, to be superior, to be tended to first. And let me tell you that in a civil society, we cannot have degrees of rights. We must have equitable rights. This has been our great struggle since the day we declared our independence as a new nation in 1776. Can I just be honest with you? Our systems were not set up to make women and racial minorities equal. They just weren't. What we see happening in America now is an uneasy, let me underscore the word uneasy, cultural and generational shift in how we approach free thought and free speech. And candidly, we're not managing it very well. It's a zero-sum game. Again, raise your hand if you're on social media. Pretty much everybody. Smart people didn't raise their hand. You're very smart and good for you. But if you're on social media, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You see the politicians, senators, governors, members of Congress, presidential candidates. I'm old enough to remember when if Ronald Reagan, there was a question as to whether or not he could run because he was divorced. Does anybody remember that? And he was remarried to Nancy. You know, that's how much we've changed. In the last 30, 40 years, the standards have shifted, but some of us haven't shifted with them. Listen, our young people, I want to speak to you for a moment. Students, hear me when I say this. And this is our failing. I feel like this is our fault. I feel like we haven't taught you the way we should teach you about managing your feelings and your emotions. Your generation uses words I don't even understand, and I'm pretty smart. But I want to learn, I want to know, and I think probably everybody here does too. You use words like unsafe, or traumatized, or toxic. You use words when you are upset, you will call a thing real quick. You will call someone a racist, you will call them a sexist, you will call them homophobic, xenophobic, misogynist, transphobic, and on and on. You might be right in what you're saying, but I'd like to challenge you to think. Try to ask a question. Is that what you meant? Now, obviously, if it's in an unsafe situation, it's physical, somebody's in your face, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about our ability to talk to one another. You can't just slap labels on people because people are more complex than that. We have literally begun to equate emotional pain or emotional discomfort with physical pain or danger when we don't like the challenging debate in the public square. We got to do better than that. Because what happens is just like if I go around crying, everything's racist, when it's really racist, nobody believes me, right? Well, she's the girl that's always crying wolf about. So when you use your words, choose them. And do your homework and really understand that when you're gonna slap something on somebody, particularly on social media or on a video or in an article, it lasts forever now. Those of us over 50 in this room and over 40, we're so grateful there weren't phones. We're so grateful there wasn't video because there's no record of the transgressions we made. And trust me, we made them. I get that that's not the case with your generation. But what I'm saying is this cannot be who America or the academy is becoming, because if it is, we're lost. Here's the takeaway from this first point. If I'm wrong, educate me. Don't belittle me. No person, not one person in this room deserves to be attacked, bullied, or have their professional career reputation damaged because they misspoke, or they got it wrong, or they simply needed help to understand what they didn't get right. Administrators and faculty must embrace neutrality. That's where I start. Neutrality means neutral. That's in Title VI, if you didn't know. And that's what these lawsuits are being filed under. And they're going to be successful. And then what does that do? That imposes a whole new set of structures on you that you deans and everybody else will have to manage. Because the courts are going to come in and tell you, if you can't get this right, we're going to get it right for you. Is that really where we want to be? I don't think so. Let me say this, because I think that in our modern discourse, we spend a lot of time talking about the far right. We talk about the far right crazies. Oh my God, they're crazy. But I want to challenge us, including me. As academics, I think we try to be well-meaning people. I do. I think we try to fix things. I think we try to put stuff in place because we don't like racism. We don't like sexism. We don't like anti-LGBTQ plusism. We don't like that stuff, and we shouldn't like it. But sometimes we overreach. And I want us to think about that when we're formulating policy statements and diversity statements. Because you know what? Those statements are why you see this pushback, this anger, this anti-DEI, this wokeism is out of control. You keep telling me how to think, how to speak, what I can and what I can't say. And what I hope I'm demonstrating is that we have a tension here that we've got to deal with. We can't avoid it because it is going to be the #1 subject in the 2024 presidential election. It's here. You can't stick your head in the sand. It's on the table. A large portion of this country believes that we are on the wrong track with everything you could think of in the culture wars. You all saw the dust up over Easter and the day of transgender visibility, right? I didn't know that March 31st was a day of transgender visibility. I had no idea. So when I saw the post come out that Biden had defiled Easter by doing this, my eyes got big. But then I started asking questions, because that's what a journalist should do. And I start watching, I was like, oh wait, this has always been a day for the last 15 years. You see how that works? It was taken way out of context and it was used for an audience that might not perhaps do a Google search, might not perhaps dig down a little bit deeper and say, oh, wow, they did this because they hate Christians. You do realize that was the debate on Easter Sunday. This is where we are. I'd like to say that I think what we ought to adapt beyond neutrality is what I call the human being test. It's a very simple thing. Do I treat people with respect and true engagement, or am I just tolerating you? Dr. Tanya, I think I heard that in church yesterday, didn't I? I might have added that after I heard that in church yesterday. Are we tolerating each other? Then the resentment builds. I'm feeling some kind of way, but I smile in your face. But I don't know if I really want to be connected to you or hang out with you because you don't walk in my point of view or through my lens. That is the real test each of us in this room is going to have to pass. Instead of our instant reactions, I'm the most guilty of all, and harsh consequences that we exact on each other when we don't get it right. Freedom for me, but not for thee. That seems to be our new American University campus and cultural motto. But in case we didn't know it, folks, and again, this is a lecture. We're going to finish up. In case we didn't know it, free speech has limitations. And again, we saw that play out after the attacks on Israel. If you have to lock your fellow students in a library or barricade them, and you're yelling at them and you're jeering at them, you need to stop and rethink that. You need to stop and rethink that. Because that is not what speech is. That is actual violence. That is actually violating somebody else's rights. We all know that freedom of speech is the core, one of the most core values we have in America. And a fundamental belief that in America, a citizen can share his or her ideas openly, express contrary or even controversial opinions, worship as he or she chooses or not, live out those religious beliefs openly or not, and not be punished or blackballed because of them. But that is not what's happening. So again, I call on you who are in the leadership. When you get into these situations on campus and you have groups at odds with each other, or you have rights in opposition to one another, you have to remain neutral. Your job is to make sure everybody's safe, everybody's okay. Nobody's being beat on or harassed or bullied in that most basic sense of it. But taking positions and choosing sides, it's gotten us to where we are. Again, like I said, unless it is so obvious, we all know if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I think we're smart people. We know when something's racist. We know, particularly if you're a marginalized group, because you've experienced it. But it might be harder for your white brothers and sisters who don't experience racism. So you're going to have to find a way. We're going to have to find a way to bridge those divides. Pathway number 2. We must unequivocally, without apology, embrace DEI and work to reform it along the way. Let me say that again. We must unequivocally embrace DEI and work to reform it for the long haul. Why do we need to reform it, Sophia? I think I had that conversation with you already. I think I told you that it is the number one issue in this country right now that congressmen are submitting bills to do away with DEI in medicine. Affirmative action is already gone. The Supreme Court wiped it out in college. I understand Michigan already had laws on the book that don't allow you to use race in admission. So Michigan was already there. The rest of the country now has to be there. Little by little, we are in what I like to call right now Reconstruction 2.0. Reconstruction 2.0, what do you mean? Well, you all remember the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. President Lincoln and the radical Republicans, what irony, of 1860s, passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, got rid of slavery, allowed black men to vote, and the Equal Protections Clause, okay? And if you look at the gains that were made up until Lincoln was assassinated, and then go to Andrew Johnson, who was what? From Tennessee, a Southerner, Confederate sympathizer, all those things began to roll back. And then comes Ulysses S. Grant, who tries to pass laws like the anti-KKK lynching laws and civil rights laws, many of still on the book. 42 U.S.C. 1981 is still in the books to this day. Those are civil rights statutes from the first civil rights movement after Reconstruction. But he lost. And so Reconstruction was stopped, and black folks never got 40 acres and a mule. And all the gains that were laid out, there were members of Congress who were black. There were senators. All of that stopped, and you guess what we got in its place? Jim Crow, 90 years of it. 90 years of it. So I'm bringing this up to say to you, folks, we've been here before. This isn't new. The past is prologue. We repeat ourselves again and again and again, unless and until we disrupt and we interrupt and we literally change our systems. Do not miss that what you see today on the political landscape is deeply connected to diversity, equity and inclusion, and freedom, and people who feel like it's being taken away from them, and people who want more of it. Polar opposites. I want something, you don't want it. What do we do? Listen, affirmative action and DEI were created as corrective mechanisms, right? That address social inequities and seek to improve the greater human condition of those who have been left out and intentionally, due to bias, kept out. The reality we must face as a country, though, and I'm going to say it's going to be hard, but it's true. Some of you guys need to just accept that by 2030, America will be a majority-minority country. And that, too, is driving what we see right now. People are afraid. It's fear. At the end of the day, if I was to simplify all this and throw this out, I would say this all gets down to human emotion and fear of one another, fear of what we don't understand. But you need to understand, particularly the professionals in this room, the DEI professionals, the deans, you guys are here to lead this next generation forward. You have to understand that these well-funded, well-organized, legal attacks on DEI or LGBTQ rights or whatever it is, it's organized intentionally. The other side is organized, folks. You better get ready. If you're not paying attention, just look at the Supreme Court. Did anybody really think Roe versus Wade, and I'm pro-life personally, but because I'm pro-freedom, I believe that another woman has a right to choose something different from me because I believe in freedom. Did anybody really think Roe was ever going to get overturned? Because I sure didn't. It took 50 some years. That doesn't happen by accident. It's patience. It's focus. It's keeping at it. The third point and the last point that I want to get to today is, I think, an important one, because we need to talk about how it is that we fix this. How do we fix it? Is it fixable? I think it is. I think if the other side can be so ramped up about how to break it and how to set it back, that we can equally be ramped up on how to make it better. I want to speak first to my Caucasian sisters in the room, because it's important. Because over the last 40 years, we see white women ascending. Now, the numbers might not be as great as they would like, but 20% of corporate boards now, 20% plus of the C-suite. At this university, you have a woman president and a woman provost. That's rare. But I want to speak to you about that all-important allyship, because white women deal with sexism, but you don't deal with racism. Women of color deal with both, all the time, every time. And we have an obligation, sisters, again, fellas, stick with me. We have an obligation, sisters, to lift each other as we climb. And so I say to my white sisters in the room, when you have an opportunity and you have power, use it. Don't be afraid because somebody opened the door for you. And it's a fascinating study. I wrote about this in my first book. When white men realized that they had daughters and nieces and sisters, and they start going, wait, my daughter wants to be a doctor, or my daughter wants to be a lawyer, or my daughter wants to be a corporate exec and get an MBA. They start changing some things. Mentorship programs were created, sponsorship. But once again, that color barrier was there. Just look at the Fortune 500. 53 white women are CEOs. That's just over 10%. One black woman is a CEO. One black male is the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. There are a few Latinas and others, but if you put everybody in a box with the people of color, you got about 5 or 6 of them. In the Fortune 500. That means that the other 400 plus positions are held by who? White males. And again, there's nothing wrong with white males, by the way. We're not picking on you. We're stating a fact because we're trying to move forward. The bottom line is, the truth is, and it hurts, is that we've had minimal gains since the civil rights movement. We've had gains. Yes, we had a black president. Okay, we had a black president. He was great, he was good. But what does that mean for everybody else? Does that mean that racism got fixed? And I think that's what we say to ourselves. We see Oprah and we say, well, black people can't be doing bad because Oprah's not doing bad. Huh? When I look at Mark Cuban, I don't say because Mark Cuban's doing well, all white people are. That's ridiculous. You see what I mean? So we got to shift our mindsets here. Okay. So as we wind down, I just want to say a few things to you about this third way, which is, what do we do to fix it? What are the steps we need to take to fix it? I had a meeting this morning, like I said, with the deans, and one of the things that struck me as very important at this school, and you deserve kudos for this, and trust me, I will tweet about it and write about it later, is that you do 2 things really well that were in my text of what we should do to fix it. The first is, you actually teach civics at this university. You have a center, civic engagement. You know how many places don't teach basic civics anymore? That's part of the problem, folks. Because you don't know what you don't know. So we're not teaching people. Did you ever watch the dude on, I forget what network he is, but he goes around with the camera and the guy on the street and he says, who's the vice president of the United States? Most people have no clue. It's scary. And they go and ask, well, who's your senators? I don't know. And these look like pretty regular, normal people. So you do civic engagement. That's the first thing. We've got to get back to basic civics, and we've got to teach it. The second thing that you do well here at OU is you partner with the community. You work with the high schools. You work with the kids K through 8. You're bringing them to campus. You're letting them come to events like this, sit in a classroom. You know how many of those children have never in their life seen anything outside of whatever their neighborhood is or whatever trauma they deal with on a regular? So by you exposing them, exposure is key. So there's 3 things you can do. University leaders, in accordance with the Constitution, must clearly define what their colleges and universities can and cannot do relative to free speech on campuses. Remember, public universities have a high bar. Private schools, not so much. Public universities are subject to the First Amendment. So you have to walk a very fine line, am I right, Provost? But you can do it if you sit down and you talk about it and you come up with, I think you were talking about, no, I think it was Dean. It was talking about, Dean Carey, was that you telling me about guided conversations? I love that concept of guided conversations. So if there's a conflict or there's something wrong, we're going to have a guided conversation about it. Number 2, colleges should, this is me talking, I think we should require constitutionally sound free speech training and DEI training by nonprofit, nonpartisan groups and recognized authorities and scholars in this area. Because it will take the pressure off all you to have to be over here, over there, and you bring in the people that don't have a stake in it. They don't have a dog in that fight. They're there just to educate and to give the facts and to teach so that people learn. The last thing is, I think that we should engage all of our students on 2 things: emotional intelligence training, and it should be a mandatory course, as well as conflict resolution. They go hand in hand. And I can tell you now, because I am in the big companies all the time, they are dealing with a difficult time. Cross-generational conflict. The baby boomers don't like the millennials, and the Xers don't like the Gen Xers. And because you know why? If you're a Gen Xer like me, you were raised very differently than someone who's 20 now. Your worldview is completely different. You do your best to understand, but I was watching Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies, yes, I admit it. And I've probably seen it 100 times. But I was looking at some of the stuff Marty and Doc were saying, and I was like, oh my God, they couldn't say that in a movie now. Like, you wouldn't be allowed. So we've shifted and we've changed, but I can tell you that companies are hungry for emotionally intelligent people who focus on wellness and care and who know how to lead with empathy. The days of the bully are over. If you're a bully, McNasty out there, you got problems. You're not going to last long because this generation isn't going to do it. Those of us that are older, we dealt with the mean queen bee boss. We dealt with unbelievable things in the 90s and 80s. If I told you young women, you wouldn't believe me. Being grabbed literally in the office, and there wasn't anything you could do about it because if you did, you're going to lose your job. Thank God we're not there anymore. But there are vestiges of that all around us. Just enacting these 3 simple steps, they sound simple, they are, will help increase the value of the modern college degree. As I close, I want to say I'm not speaking to you today as a lecturer who is espousing theory. I've actually lived all of this. I'm a black woman. I live as a black woman every day. So I understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in my own life and in the life of my sisters. I'm a woman, so I get the sexism. I've been a college professor who got in some real big trouble over a tweet. I'm speaking to you today as a concerned citizen, but I believe we can course correct, but it will require courage, transparency, and truth-telling. It will require that we stop doing the surface work and get down to the hard work that our nation and our profession has avoided for decades. Academia is still one of the most overwhelmingly white and male-run professions in America. If we truly want to change this country and protect our freedoms, colleges and educators must lead the way. We must actively seek out the expertise, engagement, and life experiences of those who do not look like us, think like us, or even worship like us. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. That is the only way forward to safeguarding and ensuring the longevity of this great republic that we all love and hold dear. Thank you for having me today. It has been my great privilege and honor. We can do questions? You gonna moderate?
So we can entertain questions. I want to start
Please
by
do.
saying, as a white woman who carries all this privilege, and I know I do, that space for not only being an ally, but being an accomplice.
I like that word.
Yeah. Because I think that is a really integral space in terms of, as a mom, as someone who's worked in this for decades, I think that there's a role that it isn't only helping, but it's trying to live so you can get through these types of things. Because I think there needs to be that, just like there's intersectionality of who we are, and especially, I mean, you're in California, right?
No, I'm in Virginia.
No, I mean,
went
you're
to
in,
college,
but
yes.
you went to college.
Yes.
So seeing how diverse it is,
Very
how intersectional everything is, and how we interact on, how would you explain that role of accomplice, intersectional, really advocating on a larger realm? And the other thing I wanted to say is we've done some things here that I think are incredible. We're really focused on equity. We're using the same dashboard that the CSU uses. We're one of 6 universities that adopted it. So we're focusing in our undergraduate. It's not for graduate, unfortunately. We're trying to get there. But we're focusing in and we're looking, wait, we have a URM gap here. We have a Pell eligible gap here. What are we doing from a pedagogical standpoint in terms of how can we have a little bit of restorative justice within this DEI space? So I think that's 3 or 4 questions in one, and I apologize.
No, don't apologize. Number one, I love the word accomplice. That kind of has a bit of a nefarious meaning to it, right? Like you're going to get into some trouble, but John Lewis would say get into good trouble. And I think that this accomplished term, now, when I was coming up, and this is just true, all my mentors were white men because there were very few white women and 0 people who looked like me in the legal profession, not in the big firms. And when I was the first Black committee counsel, I worked on the Republican staff. So that was very historic. And I remember Donna Brazile and all the Democrats coming over to see me one day. And they got me in a room and they're like, now look, I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And they said, no, we have your back. You're the first. We all know you, Sophia. We know you're a Republican. Jack Kemp was my mentor. I don't know how many of you remember Jack Kemp, but that was who got me into politics. And they said to me, we've got your back, but we're going to push you when you're wrong. And when the other side's wrong, we're going to come to you and we're going to tell you better use some of that power you got to deal with it. And so we came up with this partnership, this accomplishedness, if you will. We were accomplices. And it worked really well. And to this day, people who, again, have very divergent ideas from me, they're way to the left, and I'm to the center, right. They come to my house. I go to their house. We are still tight to this day because we understood the work we had to do. And that's where I think we got to get, we got to stop being tripped up about the differences, right? Like I said to you, you don't have to agree with somebody to respect them. You do not have to celebrate Black History Month if you don't want to. I'm not going to make you celebrate it. But you be just respectful of its observance. just as I would be for something else. So my point to you is that what you're saying matters. We throw around, like I said, we do surface work. And I think if we're honest, we know because we're all busy and we're all tired. And it takes too much effort to do this heavy lifting, right? So I'll just do the easy thing. I'll hire a couple of these people, but am I retaining and advancing them? We talked about that this morning. If you're not retaining and advancing folks, you're failing at DEI because just hiring me doesn't work. And if you put me in an environment where they don't like gay people if I'm gay, or they don't like black people if I'm black, how am I going to make it? I'm not. I'll quit in the first few months. The data tells us everything we need to know. So you're absolutely right. You got to be an accomplice, and you're right. Coming from a Cal State system university, and I was at the biggest campus. When I was there, it was 40,000 people at San Diego State. And when I went to law school at Washington and Lee University in Virginia, the elite private school that it is, and we were the first black class, and there were 8 of us in that law school class. It was, as fate would have it, the semester that Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court and Anita Hill was testifying. And I remember Professor Calhoun, yes, descendant of John C. Calhoun, saying, Ms. Nelson, are you going to be like Ms. Hill when you grow up? And I was like, I didn't even know what to say to that. I just looked at him and kind of walked in another room. It's those little microaggression, nasty things. That's my contracts professor. Now I'm afraid, well, I'm not probably going to do too well in that class. But the point is very vastly different from California to Virginia. We're talking circa 1991. So different world. But yes, that being an accomplice means I'm in, Tanya. You need something, I got your back because I have the power. And I think too often as women, girls, men do not do this. Men have no problem telling you what they want, what they don't like, what they're not going to do, how much they want to be paid. They do it all the time. The men in the room are laughing because they know I'm telling the truth. It is a fact. Forbes did this study on negotiating your worth. And let's say it's a basic tech job and I'm going to work at, I don't know, Intel. And the basic starting salary for you coming out of engineering school or whatever is $68,000, let's say. The data shows that men go in the room and say, well, I need $75,000. And because, I got a family and I need to do this. And women won't say a word. They'll take the job offer as it is and be grateful that they got the job. Why? Don't do that. Negotiate your value. If you were top of your class and he's Dr. Dum Dum, why is he getting paid more than you? So all I'm saying is that allyship is good on the surface, but if it doesn't have any teeth behind it, one of my mentors, you'll know this name, Ed Meese, former attorney general, conservative as you could be, Heritage Foundation, everything. That man opened doors for me that were simply unbelievable by picking up the phone saying, I like her, hire her. I have never gotten a job in my life that I had to apply for, ever, not once. It was always somebody picked up the phone and said, she's good, I like her. That's another, I'll come visit you another time. We'll talk about networking and how to do all that. But the point is that he put his power. I never forget when Hong Kong was going back to China. This is a true story. And Governor Whitman's term was up. I had worked for her in New Jersey. And I wanted to come down and work on the Hill, and I wanted this committee job. And I called up Ed Meese, and I got his wife first, Ursula, and I tracked him down, and I said, sir, I need your help with something. He says, well, I'm in Hong Kong right now. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. He's like, no. He was like, Congressman Christopher Cox is with me. Chris Cox was a California congressman who was chair of the subcommittee. He's like, Chris, Sophia wants a job on the committee. Can we hire her? Yeah, tell her to come see me. It was done. My point is that white men can be good mentors and allies too. White men can be accomplices too. Don't underestimate that. It's not just our white sisters or others, or if we are in the position, black women, black men, are we opening the door for our own folks? I talked about this a little bit and I skipped over some of it, but I talked about how are we treating each other in the intra as DEI, BIPOC, marginalized people? How are Black people treating their LGBTQ brothers and sisters? How are Latinos treating their indigenous sisters? How, you get it? Because we're looking at the other guys pointing the finger, but some of us treat each other pretty bad inside our own groups. and we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. I wish that that professor at CNU had come to me and simply said, Sophia, let's have a cup of coffee. Girl, I don't understand what you're trying to say here. I don't like it. I would have loved it. I offered. Didn't happen. Instead, it was a nightmare. Because when we get in our feelings and we decide you've upset me and you hate my group, I hate your group. Are you kidding? I live black and female in America every day. You really think I'm going out of my way to try to hurt another marginalized person? Really? I mean, we're not giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Sit me down and have a cup of coffee with me. Educate me. I'm pretty smart. I can learn. And I really want us to take that away today. Give people a break and ask the question. Have the conversation. It will do miracles in your life. So thank you for that. I agree with you. Next question. Is that on? Yes, ma'am. It's on.
So, I actually have a question, or I think there's this misunderstanding of what DEI actually is in our country. Sometimes I think it's somewhat intentional, right? In the media landscape. And I'm a parent as well as a professor. I've had to explain to parents in my own community what DEI is and how it benefits their kids. So I have kids with disabilities, right? That goes under DEI, right?
I didn't
That's
realize that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I think there's this misunderstanding of even what it is. So when we have DEI, right, when we have inclusion, because everyone, for some reason, DEI gets framed as race or sexuality, sometimes gender, but DEI is everyone and everything, right? So it's the diversity in the room, not just race or religion or, who you're attracted to or whatever, but it's like your age, it's your ability status, is where you come from, right? Socioeconomic. There's the equity piece, giving people what they need in order to succeed, right? It doesn't mean that someone is getting something that is not able to succeed, but for example, that might be accommodations for a student in a classroom, right? Or it might be that the student here who has less resources might require mentoring or an explanation of how to network or what are the next steps, right? And then there's that inclusion piece, making sure everyone feels at home. So this whole backlash is just really confusing to me. But regardless of that, right? I think it's really interesting that there's this narrative out there in the media space regarding DEI, and I'm just curious about how we can re-educate the populace about what DEI really is and how journalists like yourselves can use your power, for example, and networks to do that.
That's a great question. It's a big question. I'll go back to something President Biden did after George Floyd was murdered, and the protest of Black Lives Matter really was globally all throughout. And he talked to white parents and said, you ever have to talk with your son? And white people were like, what do you talk about? The talk. Biden knows because Biden's been involved and around civil rights and all things for 50, 60 years. But he said it's the talk every Black parent has to have with their teenage son and daughters. Different for boys, though. I definitely got a talk, but different from the one my brother got. And your parents tell you if a policeman stops you, here's how you better conduct yourself. Put your hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Is it okay for me to get my driver's license out or to get my registration out the glove box? It's funny, I go to a big church in Northern Virginia, and it's probably 70-30. It's a big evangelical church, mostly white. And Pastor Charlie was telling this story. He's a white guy and probably his late 40s. He's telling the story how they were coming back through North Carolina, and a cop pulled him over. And he's got wife in the car, kids in the car, and it's raucous. And cop, and he's like, I'm really annoyed by this cop because I didn't feel like I should have been stopped. And you could see everybody Black in the church kind of collectively hold their breath. And he begins to tell a story how he's arguing with the cop right then. He's like, well, and his wife is going, Charlie, chill. The kids are looking. And I'm like, no, I'm going to fight this ticket. So when he gets done talking, I walk up to him and I say, Pastor Charlie, we got to talk. Because you probably ain't going to have no Black members left after that. I was like, because you sound really dumb. And he was like, what'd I do? He didn't get it. The light bulb didn't go off that he was sharing his experience. He can argue with the cop and survive it. I can't. You can't. Period. That's just a fact. I might end up maybe not dead, but I'm going to end up beat up in jail. Something bad's going to happen. So I don't even think about disrespecting a police officer. Not that you should anyway, but you get my point. So it's things like that. When you ask the question, how do we fix it? It takes sometimes the other guy who doesn't have your experience, sadly, to be the one that talks about it. So when President Biden as a white man says the talk, that's something I didn't have to do with my boys. It made a lot of white mothers, I saw them get on Twitter and go, man, as a mom, that really bothers me. Because no, I don't have to say that to my child, but that one of my friends at work has to, or that my neighbor has to. And it really, moms were kind of upset about this thing. This went on for a while because they had no clue. What am I saying? The answer to the question is, the way we re-educate, the way we re-engage is we have to have these hard conversations like what we're doing now. This is easy because I get to get up here and just say some stuff and we get to ask questions. But the hard stuff is when something is happening at the office or you feel like somebody's not treating you right in the workplace and you know it. You're not making it up. You know you're not being treated the same as somebody else. How do you fix it? And that's where that accomplished, I should be able to come to you, Provost, and say, listen, I got a situation in my department. It's serious. I don't know how to handle it. Can you help? But then we got to involve HR. We got to do all these other things. And people just don't want to deal with the drama. So we're retracting and we're not talking and we're not doing the hard stuff. This is the place to do the hard stuff because this is safe. You're in a university. You're in an academic setting. This is the academy. This is the place where ideas, debates, fights, passion. This is the place for it to happen. We are not in the business in the university of shutting down this debate. We're not in the business of shutting down even Discord, unless, again, it turns physical and threatening, and that violates the First Amendment, and that ain't speech. That's violence. So we got to be real clear about what we're doing, and thank you for that question because it was a great question, but I think the way the media, listen, I'm not happy with my profession either. I saw Kristen Welker, and I'm going to throw her under the bus right now, Meet the Press yesterday, and, she said something about the country was divided after this video that went viral with, have you guys seen the truck video with Biden hogtied and shot? And I actually saw a truck like this when I was down south. It's a sticker that you put on the back of your GMC or whatever, and it's like long. And Biden's there and he's like this and he's dead. And trucks put a sticker on, and this particular truck, of course, had the sticker and then had the, 2024, da-da-da-da-da. Any rate, it was retweeted and shared by this other candidate on True Social. And bottom line is the media picked it up. Well, people were really angry at Kirsten Welker because they're like, how are you justifying in some world that this just shows the country's divided? I was engaged to a Secret Service agent. Let me tell you something. If I do something like that right now, they're coming to my house. They're going to meet me at the door and say, Miss Nelson, we need to have a conversation with you because we saw this post or we saw you said this. This violates literally part of the U.S. code. You can't threaten the life of the president. Is it a murky line? All I'm saying is we as journalists have a responsibility to be neutral arbiters. We got to call balls and strikes, just like the academic administrators do. And you got to be able to say, listen, this thing right here, this is not just a divided country. This actually violates a federal statute. This is something that if any other citizen in this room did it, they're coming to see you. An FBI agent and a U.S. Secret Service agent are coming to your house with guns. They're not going to pull it on you, but they're going to talk to you and ask you, are you tied up with certain groups? And then they're going to look at your social media and they're going to do a deep dive. They're going to do a background check on you. Why even open yourself up to something that crazy, right? So we do have a responsibility. Judges' kids being attacked. I've never seen anything like it. I was an attorney for a long time. Judges are revered. You don't talk trash about a judge because you want them to decide in your favor. And you definitely don't threaten their children. You can, but again, people that do that go to jail. So what I'm saying is we're playing by a different set of rules right now. I don't recognize them either. But the way we in this room fix this is do what we're doing now. Draw people in. Don't push them out. If you don't understand something, ask the question. All you can do is just be wrong or they don't want to answer, but at least you tried. And those of us, again, in the marginalized community, we have a very extra special duty to each other, to protect each other, to look out for each other. And when one of us messes it up, yank me, sit me down, have coffee with me and say, listen here, you're really smart. Let me tell you why this was problematic or why this upset some people. That's all you got to do. But the moment you start calling people racist and bigot and homophobic and transphobic and whatever word, xenophobic, you've already shut down dialogue. Now I'm ready to fight you. Now I'm ready to get, okay, that's what we're doing. You see what I mean? And that's what we're doing a lot of in this country right now. We're already in the posture. Let's go. That's wrong. Thank you for your question. Another question? Come up here, hon. Okay. Well, let's do one more after her. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we're all going to be having a lot of discussion for a long time to come about your lecture.
Good.
I'm one of the faculty members here, and you mentioned something about when something happens and people are getting upset and uncomfortable and emotional, and that we should be having like a guided conversation. Can you explain more what that process is, and also how does that? Where does that occur? Like what happens when you're in the middle of a class in the moment?
Terry,
trying
come
to
up here
do
for a second.
something?
Come on. I'll
And
put you
like,
spot. Come on.
do you have it then, or do you send them to Dr.
Come here.
Bailey? How does it work? Thank
Yes.
you.
So she asked about the guided conversation. So I'm going to get the expert who taught me about a guided conversation because I really like it. And I actually took notes and was texting myself like, that's good. So explain to them what a guided conversation is and where we do it on this campus and how it works.
So hi everyone, I'm Elaine. So a guided conversation is very similar to a facilitated conversation. And we do this a lot. I think this is the work that we've seen in Dr. Dulio's Center for Civic Engagement, but also with the Klein Center with Dr. Sue's work. And again, a lot of this is talking about important issues and events that are currently happening, whether in the state or in the nation or in the world. And so we do host a lot of these conversations, but it's a model, I think, that you can.
Like how's it work?
So it can be like a series of questions and answers around a particular issue. So rather than just lectures are great, right? Lectures are important, but rather than having a lecture, having a conversation. So in many ways, it's being modeled to have those exchanges or in civil discourse, but it's being modeled through that, the question and answer or the ways to have conversations. So it's not just in the College of Arts and Sciences, it's across the campus. And I think we're having that this week too.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Give her a hand. Okay, last question. One more and then we're done. I need a male to ask me a question. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you so much for your talk. I'm also one of the faculty at the School of Medicine, and I'm an anatomist. I was part of the American Institute of Anatomy DEI committee. In fact, I was the chair for the past 2 years. And one of the things that we're discussing currently is a lot of the times nationwide there is curbing of the DEI things. They cannot talk about this. And so I'm hearing a lot from my colleagues on what are the things that they could do. And me as a faculty member and in our association, how can we support our friends and colleagues at other universities that are going through issues like this?
We talked about that a little bit in the dean's meeting. And one of the things I've always thought is, given that the Supreme Court has said no more affirmative action on college campuses, being that, you have congressmen who are doctors submitting legislation to get rid of DEI in medical schools. We already know we have a very small number of Black doctors, doctors of color, which affects health equity. It affects all kinds of things that are it's just like this rolling snowball. So one of the things I've always thought is that if we used a class-based model, it's a way to get around it. Now, hear me when I say this, because if I go by socioeconomic status, and which I don't know of any laws against that because that's how you determine financial aid. I guarantee you, if you look at the socioeconomic status of folks and whatever, you're going to get a very large pool. You're going to get poor whites, you're going to get blacks, you're going to get Latinos, you're going to get all groups. And because the truth is, what's the median income in this country? Is it $50,000 a year? Something like that? Maybe not even that high. If you think about that for a moment, where I live in Northern Virginia, the median income is $130,000 a year. Because you have the federal government, you have all the big contractors. It's a much different standard of living than out here in the Midwest. I'm assuming it's what, $50,000. So think about that. Most people are going to fall into that bucket, which allows you to look. And I think that's one of the things we're going to have to explore in the legal profession and medical profession, where we start looking at the economic data. Okay, you don't want me to deal with color. You don't want me to deal with whatever. I got you. Cool. But I can look at financial, and I can look at where this person comes from and what their zip code is, because that's going to tell me a lot. And like I said, I also would like to see this country. I think part of what we can do to help heal this. Listen, like I said, I grew up with folks that were working class, working at the Navy Yard, guys, my friends' dads, my dad, Vietnam, they served, these guys, just a different world. And they feel like the world has moved on beyond them, right? Because their manufacturing jobs aren't there anymore. They don't have the jobs that they used to have at the Union Carbide plant. In South Jersey, you had Campbell Soup that was there forever. And then the kids, when the parents died, sold it, and it's up in Canada now. You know how many jobs left that region of the country when Campbell Soup left? And so what I'm saying is, I grew up with folks like this, so I know how to speak the language. And what I'm telling you is, we've got to somehow find a way to definitely, absolutely keep focus on DEI and we need more doctors of color. That's a no-brainer. We all get that. But I like to give some poor white kids a shot too. You know what I mean? That have the talent. And we got to figure out a way to fix this thing so that we're bringing people to the table and we're not pushing them out and we're not making them feel like they're not important or they don't matter. So I think that's what's breaking us right now. We're just divided. The DEI folks are here and other folks are here, and we're at each other. It's going to break the country. So thank you for your question. I'm done. Thank you. Tanya, I can't say enough. Again, Dr. Bailey, can we give Dr. Bailey a hand, not only for that amazing rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, but just for putting this together. And thank you all for staying and sticking with me. I know it's a long afternoon, so I'm going to go sign some books now. And now, let me say a caveat about this last book that I got. I didn't bring the one that's on America and the Imploribus Unum, which kind of probably should have fit with this theme. But the last book I think is really important because it's about wellness. And it's about me writing, and the subtitle I think says it all, 21 Life Lessons I Learned Taking Care of Everyone But Me. Every woman in the room gets that one, right? And men, I know that you deal with wellness and mental health challenges too, and that you aren't allowed, we don't give you the space to talk about it, to not be okay. The culture says that you're not being a man if you cry. That's bogus. But it's more me sharing the anecdotes of life and some of my own life experiences and just how you get through. Because when you're always focused on everyone else but you, life becomes pretty challenging. And there are a lot of women in this room who are looking at me right now, nodding their head. It's okay to be a good mom. It's okay to be a good wife. But if you're tired all the time and cranky all the time and you got on the crazy outfit with the sweatshirt and the coffee cup and you look deranged, I mean, your husband's not really going to want to step to you, right? So what I'm saying is you got to take care of you first, because you're a better executive, a better mom, a better spouse. When you take care of you, you got more to give. And that's really the premise. And so I hope you'll check it out and share it. Maybe get a copy. If you're not interested, take one home. She'll like it. And I'll autograph it and thank you. Thank you. What is this?
This is a plaque for you.
Oh, wow.
So we're not done. Would you step out just a
Yes, absolutely.